Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, I haven't lied too much on my CV. And thank you, Andres, for your very kind introduction. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about health economics and health economics evaluation. Hopefully, I won't bore you too much, but the introduction was exhaustive, so I'm just going to skip that over. Here's my disclosures. Not much to report, but here we go anyway. So tonight, we have quite an ambitious table of contents here. I would like to take you through what is economics, what is health economics. I'd like to introduce you to economic evaluations, how we measure health benefits, and what the sources are for economic evaluation. Let's leave point 5 on the side for a bit. I just like to be controversial. So let's go right ahead with the first topic. So what is health and what is economics? Now, healthcare is a derived demand. It is a demand that it exists because we wish to improve our health. And why do we want to do that? We want to do that because health is a fundamental commodity. It is affected by the quality and availability of healthcare provision, but also by many other factors. Good health will significantly affect many other aspects of a person's well-being. Obviously, when you think about your life and you want a good life, you think about good health. That is the first wish you make to a person. So once we've got this in, the fact that we've got health as a derived demand, let's think about what is economics. Now, Samuelson, a very famous economist, defines economics as the study of how men and society end up choosing to employ scarce resources that could have alternative uses to produce various commodities and distribute them for consumption, now or in the future, among various people and groups in society. So then when we talk about economics, we talk about the study of how scarce or finite resources are allocated, considered in light of other opportunities for use, and therefore the foregone benefit of using them in that way, the opportunity cost, and the consumption and distribution of the commodities produced from those resources among the different groups within society. So just to sum it up, it's the choices that we make in employing the resources we have available that are limited in producing some commodities and how we distribute them to in the different groups within society. Okay, so now we've got down what economics is. It's fairly simple. I hope, well, fairly simple, I say. I hope it's clear to everyone. Do give me a shout if there's any issue, any questions, or if I have been unclear, or tell me to speed up if I'm being too obvious. So what the hell is health economics? Now, Morris, Devlin, Parkin, and Spencer teach us that health economics is the application of economic theory, so what we just talked about, so the allocation of scarce resources and the commodities produced from them within the groups in society. So it's the application of those theories, of those models, of those empirical techniques to the analysis of decision-making by individuals, healthcare providers, and government with respect to health and healthcare. So, as I said, economics is a science that looks at the allocation of scarce resources. Health economics is simply the equivalent, but it's just concerned with the allocation of scarce resources to improve health. Now, this includes both the allocation of resources within the economy to the healthcare system in general, so how much of the resources available to the overall economy are allocated to the healthcare system in general, as well as to the different activities and categories of people within the healthcare system or our patients that receive the healthcare resources. So, what are the bases of health economics? Health economics is a bit of a process. The health economics, the basis of health economics start from a simple realization that this realization was, the first economists came to it a fair bit, a few years ago. Resources are scarce, right? So you'll be thinking, all right, thank you. You've said that twice already, but have a think. Why are resources scarce in healthcare? They are scarce because demand for health is infinite. We want as much health as we can get. No one, wishes to be worse off. No one wishes to be less healthy. So we always want more health. We always want to be more healthy. We want to be better off at all times. With time, as we have grown healthier, as we have beaten diseases, we have developed vaccines and treatments for conditions much like our own, our life expectancy has increased hand in hand with our demand for healthcare. And we say that demand for healthcare is infinite because the more health we have, the more we get used to it and the more health we want. There's an additional property to this. So as technologies improved, giving us better health and a longer life, we learn to expect more and more. And so we should. And that's why research always strives to the next improvement in care. So then why can't we have infinite healthcare up to the point to where we all have perfect health? Well, that's because resources are scarce, right? Aside from the obvious worldly limitations, unfortunately, care has got to be paid for, right? And delivered by someone with specific instruments, be that a specific tool or a drug. We only have a limited number of nurses, of doctors, of drugs, and for obvious production and financial constraints. So then, if we have limited number of doctors, a limited number of drugs, and a limited number of nurses, and obviously we have a limited number of money, a limited amount of money, how do we allocate the finite resources we have to make most efficient use for them? We make choices. So choices are necessary. Do we fund or increase a hip replacement or a renal transplantation? Which one is the one we pick, right? We need to make choices. We need to pick a procedure or another, a population or another, a treatment or another, or a mix of them. And we need to weigh our options to make efficient decision. So in making a decision, in choosing something over something else, what do we need to do? We need to prioritize, right? We need to make sure that we pick the best option. But then how do we do that? What are the criteria? On what basis do I choose something over something else? So we need to come up with those criteria. We need to write down our rules of the game, right? We need to, apologies. Lost my train of thought. Yeah, so we need to write down our. Okay. Yeah. Take a sip of water in the meantime.
Sí, ingresaron recién. Perdón que interrumpamos así. Hay un icono que dice interpretación, que tiene un mundo. Si le dan clic allí, ustedes se van a poder posicionar sobre el idioma que quieren escuchar. Está inglés y español. Cuando se posicionan sobre el canal de español, van a escuchar la traducción y en el audio original y en inglés van a tener al disertante.
Yo escucho en español.
Let me know when I'm.
La doctora Mayra dice, quisiera saber que si ella la puede escuchar.
Sorry?
Mayra. De resto, ¿alguien más tiene ese problema? ¿Alguno más tiene ese inconveniente? Si es solamente una persona, es muy probable que sea la actualización del Zoom que tiene ella y que está manejando en su equipo. Doctora Mayra, intente de nuevo, por favor. Si quiere, salga de la sala Zoom y vuelva a ingresar.
Am I okay to go?
Creo que podemos continuar. Perdón.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's all right. So, what was I saying? So I was just saying, we need to prioritize. But how do we do that? How do we write our rules of the game? How do we make our decisions? How do we choose? You know, when thinking about this, the best, most efficient way that we thought of as cold-hearted economists was to measure the cost, right? To measure the cost of the drug or the cost of the intervention, the specific intervention that we were assessing. So the cost, the resources, the cost that are the resources necessary to produce our commodity, health, and the resulting benefits, right? Our commodity itself, so health. Now, measuring costs is fairly easy. It's just how much money I need to get to buy something, right? Let's just leave the opportunity cost to the side right now. We'll go back to it later. But how do I measure benefits? So, well, measuring the cost is quite straightforward. Health consequences of an intervention, of a drug, of a procedure are quite less tangible. They're not so easy to measure, but they are just as important, as they indeed are the main reason for which most health services are provided, because we want to achieve better health. Now, just to, not sure what's happening here. Oh, there's an animation. All right, I didn't know that was happening. So in talking about costs, we also have to consider the opportunity cost of something, right? So these are some examples of what the opportunity cost of 4 months of dialysis for a renal patient might be. So now the opportunity cost is the cost of foregoing the next best thing that I could get with the same amount of money that I am using to get a particular thing. Now, this is very abstract, but think about it this way. If I were to pay right now for 4 months of dialysis for a patient with renal failure, I would be giving up either a 1.5 cochlear implant, 1 heart bypass operation, 1,000 vaccinations for measles, mumps, and rubella, or 5,000 school dinners, right? So to buy 4 months of dialysis, I would be giving up 5,000 school dinners. That is the opportunity cost of the 4 months of dialysis. Now, think about it this way. Try and visualize it in your head. It's the same cost with the same resources. I would be able to feed 13 children for a whole year. All right, so that's the opportunity cost. Now, obviously, we would be choosing whatever makes the most sense, but that's just an idea, just to give you an idea of what the opportunity cost is, right? In this case, I'm choosing to get 4 months of dialysis, but I'm giving up for feeding 13 children for a year. That doesn't mean they're going to starve, by the way, bless them. So when we talk about costs, obviously we have to think about different types of costs. So, you know, there's many types of costs, but what we do is generally categorize them in three major categories: direct costs, direct non-medical costs, and indirect costs. Now, when we talk about direct costs, and they can be fixed or variable depending on whether they change with the quantity of the procedure provided. They are directly associated with the intervention or the condition, right? So when we talk about direct medical cost, it's something that is 100% related to the treatment of a particular condition. Now, let's think about hemophilia for a second. All right, so let's go into detail. Who can think of a direct medical cost that could be a direct medical cost associated with hemophilia? Yeah. Am I okay to go ahead? Oh. Yes, I was asking questions. I was just wondering if anyone can think about one example of a direct medical cost associated with the care of hemophilia. What is the one cost that you think the healthcare system bears, the major cost that is associated with hemophilia? Yeah. Don't be shy. Anyone? Oh, okay. Yes, very good. It's the cost of factor, right? Correct. Factor is the main direct cost that is associated with hemophilia and its treatment. It's widely reported to constitute over 95% of the total cost of of the management of our condition, especially when and where prophylaxis is widely practiced in a particular healthcare setting. However, there are other costs that are associated with hemophilia. Anyone else can think of any other direct costs that might be associated with hemophilia or its outcomes? You know, it could be the consequences of the disease as well, of the condition as well. I'm happy to provide some examples. Can I go ahead? Okay, so some other examples of direct costs. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so exactly that. So medical consultations, hematologists, physiotherapists, any other specialty. The surgeries, the joint surgeries that unfortunately we do need sometimes, and the physical therapy, which is sometimes covered by the healthcare system, but also hospitalizations, for example. Hospitalizations are a big cost that sometimes is overlooked, and sometimes it may be directly associated with hemophilia, and that can be a ward stay, a simple ward stay, or a ICU, intensive care unit stay. But also we have tests. So when you go and see your hematologist, sometimes they give you, they take some blood and they do some tests. They'll run your blood panel, they'll check your factor 8 or factor 9 level. Those are all costs that are directly related with the condition and its management, right? We then have direct non-medical costs. Now, these are costs that are associated with the condition, but are generally not borne by the healthcare system. Okay, so it's not the healthcare system that pays them. These costs are generally borne by the patient or the government, but if they are borne by the government, they are not paid through the healthcare system. Anyone can think of any direct non-medical costs that are associated with hemophilia? Anything covered by, I see. Okay. Yes, very good, very good. However, we've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves. So when we're talking about direct non-medical costs, we're talking about all those costs that are directly valuable, okay, so that we can evaluate directly in money terms straight away, something that has a price, okay? So the first example is right. So the cost of transportation to your hemophilia center, for example, but also the cost of over-the-counter medication. So say sometimes, this week your joints hurt a little bit, so you just go to the pharmacy and pick up some pain medication, right? Or some anti-inflammatory, which might help with your joint pain or your joint, mobility. Alternative therapies, so say for example acupuncture, physiotherapy, if it's not covered by your healthcare system, where you're choosing to go to a private institution, your osteopathy, your acupuncture, any sort of alternative complementary therapy. Your transport, obviously, as was mentioned, your physical aids, so for example, a cane or crutches that you might need if you're hurt, or if you just need them short term, but also transfer payments. And this is where the government comes in, because transfer payments and disability allowances are direct non-medical costs, because they are a movement of money that we can place a direct value on. Right? So it's obviously not borne by the patient. In fact, the patient receives it when they are entitled, but they are nonetheless a cost that is borne by someone directly. Now, okay, well, it's fine. It doesn't matter. It's okay. I've already said it, so it's okay. I was just going to give the last example of a direct non-medical cost, which is, for example, that of a professional caregiver when it's needed by a patient. So that could be a professional caregiver that is taking care of a child, or someone who has a disability such that they are not able to perform some daily tasks. This can be anything. It could be mowing your lawn, or it could be washing your dishes, or it could be, taking your medication, for example. So treating yourself. Sometimes some patients are not able to, maybe they're scared of needles, whatever. But the professional caregiver who comes to your house and treats you has a cost. Now, this may be borne by yourself, the patient, or myself, or the government, if they pay for that professional caregiver. But it's a cost that we can place a value on nonetheless. Okay. Now, going back to the last message in the chat, there's a couple of interesting things that were said. So I think that says, and apologies if I'm not translating correctly, but the value of disability, right? For the kind of missed the work days, right? Yeah. So that is correct. So that is not a direct medical cost, but it's also not a direct non-medical cost. It's an indirect cost, what we call a societal cost. So it's a cost that it's incurred from lost productivity due to treatment or your illness, right? So indirect costs are those that are incurred by the society. You'll be thinking, the other costs are also borne by society. Yes, they are. However, these are a little bit more abstract, and that's why I was mentioning something that we can place a value on directly before. These are not so easily quantifiable. These are costs that need to be derived. And some examples are for time used for informal care. So, for example, when I was a child, my mum would care for me, and she would take a few days off her job every month to care for me. Now, a person who's not a professional caregiver, like what we discussed before, like a nurse or a professional caregiver, so like a mother, a sister, a friend, whoever, they will have a job, right? I hope they have a job. But why do we need to find the cost for this person caring for me? Well, because the time they spend caring for me, or for a person with a condition in general, and by caring, again, I mean any sort of task, could be driving me to the Hemophilia center for whatever reason. It could be again helping me with my treatment, helping me doing chores. But their time could be employed somewhere else productive, working, right? So we need to capture their employment status, and we need to calculate what the cost of the time spent caring for me is, so that I can I can calculate the value of that time. And this is important because ultimately the time spent caring for a person with a condition is the same, is time that could be spent on something else, on other productive activities. So activities productive to the economic or social benefit of the society, which could be done if the person with the condition was appropriately treated or cured, and therefore didn't need caring for, right? But we also need to measure the cost of how much productivity is lost on the side of the patient themselves, right? Say I work at an office, and due to my condition, I miss 2 days of work. I get paid anyway, so I don't really care that much, right? However, during those 2 days, I've not been productive, and therefore the cost of my absence is borne by my company, the people I work for. And in the process of handing down costs to their clients and their clients and their clients, ultimately, this cost is borne by society as a whole in lost productivity. Because those 2 days don't just disappear, do they? They are there and they're lost productivity. So all of these costs can be quantified, are quantified, and there are several methods to do this. This is beyond the scope of today's discussion. I think I'm already way past where I wanted to be in terms of time, but do let me know if you're interested in learning more about this, and I can give you a couple of resources to read. Now, let's go back to the economic principles underlying healthcare decision-making. So people face trade-offs, right? As I said before, we need to make choices. So we face trade-offs. Healthcare generates benefits, and that benefit costs money. That much is sure. However, the money we spend on certain benefits, say a hip replacement, could be spent somewhere else. So factor products, for example. So that's my opportunity cost. Whenever I pick hip replacements, my opportunity cost is the benefit that I decide to forgo by not purchasing factor products with my money. Now, it's important to understand, and that's the second economic principle, is that rational decisions, or efficient ones, are those that are made at the margin. Now, what does that mean? That is, we need to decide based on current level of specific interventions. Or in other words, we need to decide to do a little bit more or a little bit less. It's okay? Yeah, I'll just start with the second principle again. Second principle, rational decisions are made at the margin, right? So what does that mean? Rational decisions are made when we need to decide based on current level of specific interventions, or in other words, we need to decide to do a little bit more or a little bit less of something, right? Let me just give you a useful example. It might be simpler to understand it this way. What is something that we need in a way comparable to healthcare, right? What is the most essential thing to human life that you can think of? In fact, not only human life in general. Water, right? We need water. So suppose we live in a town and we have a reservoir and it's not rained in 3 months, and the amount of water that we usually consume that time of year exceeds what we have available. Now, this town has a mayor, and he decides he wants to reduce the consumption of water, but is wondering how. How can he do that? How can he tell people to use less water? Now, the simple answer from any economist would be raise its price, right? Cost more, they'll use less. Well, a common counter argument to this, and because water is something that is, obviously very much needed by people, is that a higher price is not going to affect its consumption. Sorry, its consumption, because people really do need it. So it allows us to cook, to drink, to wash ourselves, but also to water our garden, to wash our car. But think about this with the concept of the margin in mind. Choices in water consumption, like anything else, are made at the margin. We don't choose either to consume or not to consume water. We make the choice to either use a little bit more or a little bit less every time we are about to open the tap. If the price increases at the point of using more water, you might decide to use a little less to save some money. But that does not mean that you're not going to use any water at all. So think about this with the opportunity cost in mind. Say, as you'll recall, the opportunity cost is the cost of going the next best thing once you've decided to do something. Say your salary is the same as last year, but because of the drought, the water price has increased. If you want to keep your garden watered and your car as sparkly as last year, you might have to spend more. But if you do that because your salary is fixed, so that's your finite resource, you're going to have to give up something else. Say, for example, going out to dinner with your friends. Now, going out to dinner with your friends provides a benefit, right? You have fun. Your benefit is your fun. But if I want to wash my car, I'm going to have to give up that fun that month to wash my car. So when I'm about to turn on the tap to wash my car, I think, would I rather have my car cleaned for a couple of days or have fun with my friends? Now, if it were me, I'd not wash my car, because the increased cost of water is not worth the limited benefit I get from washing my car when compared to going out, right? So there, I've made a choice based on the cost and the opportunity cost and the benefit I derive from the two options. So I'm trading off one against the other, and I'm choosing the one that works best for me, the one that is most efficient for me. Any questions? Was that clear? Was that clear enough? Was that okay? I'll take that as a yes. So the third principle, and I promise the rest is not as boring, is that people respond to incentives. Okay, so healthcare providers and consumers will change their behavior in response to altered incentives. So using this example again, given my fixed salary, limited resources, the increase in the price of water, my incentive, I'm making a decision at the margin because I'm choosing at the point of opening the tap to not wash my car in light of the fact that I'd have to give up going out with my friends, the opportunity cost. And I'm at this point making an efficient decision because I get more benefit from allocating my resources alternatively. And I'm doing so in response to an incentive, the higher price of water. Okay? Now, talking about economic evaluation. Economic evaluation is essentially a choice, right? It's defined by two main characteristics. Drummond, one of the heroes of many health economics nerds, such as myself, teaches us that it's a comparative analysis, which means that we undertake the analysis with the aim of comparing two different options and decide based on a set of criteria which one is the most efficient. Second, these criteria, net of all potential variations, are generally the costs of the two different options and their consequences, whereby consequences in this case, we mean health benefits. So ultimately, the overall aim of economic evaluation and health economics is to aid decision makers by providing them scientifically sound evaluation of the efficiency of the options available to make efficient and equitable decisions by comparing the costs and the benefits of healthcare interventions. Not all economic evaluations are created equal, however. So unfortunately for you guys, because it means that you're going to have to listen to me some more, they're not all the same. Here there are four main types of economic evaluations, and I'll try and be quick. There are others, but let's talk about these four, which are the main four. So we have cost minimization, and the name says it for us. It compares two options by generally assessing direct costs and decides which one is the cheapest, right? Of the two options, which one is the cheapest, with the assumption that they are equivalent. That is, they achieve the same outcome. Now, there's a slight complication to this. The conclusions of this analysis are only valid if it can be shown that the alternatives achieve identical outcomes. That is, two interventions or medicines that achieve exactly the same outcome and differ only by price. You can already see how in practice this is very rarely true. When new technologies come to market, they generally also bring improvements in effectiveness, with the exception of biosimilars and generic medicines, but that's another thing. We then have cost effectiveness. Now, cost effectiveness compares across different interventions that achieve an outcome, which is not necessarily equal, but that it is necessarily measured with a common metric to identify the one that is least costly per unit of outcome. The outcome is generally measured in natural units. So, for example, a symptom-free day, or a positive detection of a condition if it's a test, or in our case, for example, a bleed-free day. So careful here with the difference between cost effectiveness and cost minimization. No, in cost minimization, we're looking for the cheapest. Simple as that. We're looking for the cheapest way to achieve a fixed outcome. In cost effectiveness, we're looking at the intervention that has the least cost per unit of outcome. There is no fixed quantity of outcome to be achieved. Okay. Now, cost utility analysis. This one is quite interesting, actually. It's basically the same as a cost effectiveness analysis, but it measures the outcome in a common metric where utility has an impact. This in health economics is generally the QALY, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. And essentially, it just measures the, instead of using natural units, it uses utility or quality adjusted life years in this case. Last but not least, we have cost benefit analysis, which is simpler in many ways. It essentially compares the costs and the benefits of a given intervention, but both the cost and the benefits here are measured in the same metric, that is usually currency, to determine whether the outcomes are worth achieving given the costs incurred. Essentially, it allows us to determine whether the cost saving that I could make by buying a certain intervention now is larger, so the cost saving is bigger than the price of the intervention itself. So essentially, it looks at the potential costs that can be saved as a consequence of spending some money on an intervention now. Okay. Now, these are the four main types. Here is a little bit of a reminder. This table is quite useful because it provides a summary of the four types of economic evaluations, and it's very useful when, trust me, it's going to happen. You will forget which one is which and which measure they use. Now, we have additional details on each of the economic evaluations. However, I'm not going to go through them. I'll give you some materials later if you wish. There's some that will be uploaded on the platform for you to look at. But essentially, cost minimization is risky because it's very seldom that two interventions have exactly the same outcome, and this assumption just does not hold in the real world most of the time, and this may cause when novel therapies reach the market, they may be considered equivalent to the current available technology when they are not. And this is very dear to me because this happened in the UK a few years ago when EHLs became, so extended half-life factor treatments became available. Essentially, they were considered as equivalent to standard half-life, so our traditional factor products. And because the system then used, yeah. Yeah. So I was just saying that the implications of cost minimization analysis are quite dear to me because a few years ago when extended half-life factor products were introduced in the UK, they were considered as equivalent to standard half-life factor products, and therefore a cost minimization analysis was used, and they were not provided to the patients to the extent that we saw in other countries, for example. There is actually a white paper on this, which we wrote with my colleagues in the University of Chester around this latent demand that the cost minimization analysis used by the by NICE and the UK system has caused, which I can share with you. I think that will be also uploaded on the platform, and it's called well, actually no, it's fine. I'll just leave a note later with the title. Cost effectiveness analysis. This is arguably the most interesting one. Essentially, it allows us to compare interventions that are not necessarily in the same disease area, because we have a common metric that we can choose, and we can choose the intervention that provides the most of that metric for the same money, essentially. So we can compare across disease areas. And a very simple representation of the result of a cost effectiveness analysis, which is obviously cost effectiveness, is the cost effectiveness plane. So we have two axes. The vertical one is the cost difference. So obviously, if I'm in the top half, I'll have increased costs. If I'm in the bottom half, I'll have decreased costs. If I look at the horizontal axis, I'll have increased effectiveness on the right side and decreased effectiveness on the left side. Okay, so essentially, this compares intervention A to intervention O. O could either be the standard of treatment, or which is the status quo, or a competing intervention or a competing drug. Now, just to put this into perspective, we'll just go through a little bit of an exercise, right? So, bottom right, the intervention is both beneficial and cheaper, right? So more qualities, more health benefits, and less money. Great, right? That's perfect. That's what we want. If we look at the top left, here the intervention is both less effective, so it's worse for the patients, and it's more expensive, so it costs more to the healthcare system. We don't want that. In the other two, however, the intervention on the top right, the intervention is both more beneficial, but also more expensive. And on the other hand, at the bottom left, the intervention is both less effective, but also cheaper. Now, how do we decide if an intervention is worth approving and reimbursing when it's in those two quadrants of the cost effectiveness plane? We don't know. There are methods to solve this problem, this conundrum, but we'll get on that a little bit more later. Now, I'll skip through the cost benefit analysis and the cost utility analysis. You can look that up in the materials later. About the cost utility analysis, I'll only mention the utility measure, so our health benefit measure in this case, which is the QALY. Finally, we got to the point where we can look at what the QALY is. So the QALY is the most used utility measure. It's quality adjusted life year, and it's most commonly derived using the EQ5D. More on that later. But there are many other patient reported outcome measures, including disease-specific tools like the Hemoqual and Hemophilia, treatment satisfaction, treatment compliance, anxiety and depression measures. There is a lot out there. But ultimately, in cost utility analysis, I use QALYs, right? I use health benefits. And I can derive QALY by using health-related quality of life, which is the weight I can put on a year based on the quality of life that I'm experiencing in a particular moment. So I can use health-related quality of life to weigh my years and calculate QALY. So measuring health benefits. There are a number of measures here. Don't be scared by the number of different measures that are here. We can for now ignore these three. Let's focus on the QALY. So QALY means quality adjusted life year, right? And it's the standard, it's the gold standard that we use in evaluating health benefits. Essentially, it's the adjustment of the length of time affected through the health outcome or the intervention by the preference weight, that is the quality of life experienced by the patient, of the resulting health status from the administration of the drug or the intervention. Okay, so essentially it's a measure of health outcome, and each period of time is weighed between 0 and 1, 0 being death and 1 being perfect health. And it corresponds to the health-related quality of life during that period. So it's essentially the area, and we call it the area under the curve. So let's just, before we get to that, let's look at how QALYs are derived. So EQ5D is the one that we generally use for deriving QALYs, or rather health-related quality of life, which we use to derive QALYs. And EQ5D is a generic questionnaire. It's a generic quality of life measure, and and among others, we have a list here, and they are designed so that they can be used for a wide variety of health conditions. They are comparable, and therefore they allow us to compare the health benefits from an intervention in one disease area with the health benefits of an intervention in another area. There are many generic measures, and here are some examples. But obviously, as I said, the EQ5D is the most widely used. They all do essentially the same thing, which is use a predefined method to assess quality of life at a particular moment in time, to allow us to use that utility to weigh the life years gained from a particular intervention. I will spare you the explanation of how we calculate the utility. However, just to mention, essentially, it's a health state classification system, which is administered to patients, and it's valued through tariffs, which are derived by the general population through a direct utility elicitation exercise. Essentially, we ask the public what they think about that specific health state, because ultimately policymakers are making decisions that should reflect the values and the preferences of the society as a whole, which is why we need to derive the tariffs attached to the health states from the general population. Now, EQ5D specifically has 5 dimensions and 5 levels, so it can define 3,125 different health states, and each is valued by a tariff that is derived from the general public, as I mentioned before. I'm not going to go through again the calculation process, but it's an algorithm and some cool statistical stuff, which probably will sound boring, but essentially the number of qualities is calculated by multiplying a person's life expectancy by the weight assigned to the health-related quality of life experienced in each period. And now, finally, we've seen this graph a few times. Finally, I can explain what this is. So this is our 0 to 1 weight. This is our quality of life. We can have quality of life of 0, which corresponds to death, and quality of life of 1, which corresponds to perfect health, like the best health you can imagine. Now, let's suppose I start at 0.9, like 0.8, like most of the general population, right? Because everyone has a little bit of a problem here and there. Now, suppose that a month in, I get diagnosed with a condition, and I get diagnosed with a condition because I get an attack. Now, say there is no treatment available, and therefore this attack or this episode causes my quality of life to diminish, right? So I have diminished quality of life. Sorry, I'm indicating on the wrong screen. So I have diminished quality of life on the after the attack, and I don't have any treatment because there's no treatment available or no treatment approved for this specific condition. So my quality of life drops. Okay, and I carry on. I hold on for a bit, but then after a few months, I have another episode which drops my quality of life even further to 0.3 or 0.4, which is quite low. And you know, it drops, and they treat me, they give me some weird medicine. I feel a little bit better, but it's not what it used to be. My quality of life is not what it used to be. And then I have another attack. I have another episode, and my quality of life drops even lower. And then I try something else, and I feel a little bit better. But again, it doesn't go back to what it was before. And then I reach the end of my life expectancy, right? This is sort of my quality of life and my life expectancy without the intervention, without the drug. Now, if there was a drug or a health program that would allow me to treat my condition, now say I was diagnosed and say I had the attack, but my condition was still pretty mild, and I had a drug available that would allow me to treat this condition, my quality of life might just stay the same for a bit of time, drop when I have the second attack, but not by all that much, because I have treatment available to sort of contain it, right? And then I carry on, I skip the second attack because I have treatment available, and I get to the point where, because of the treatment, I surpass the life expectancy that I had without, and then I have another attack, and you know, I still maintain a good level of quality of life, and then again at some point I'll reach my life expectancy. But if you think about this in terms of quality of life and duration, here we both have a longer duration but also a better quality of life. So the health gain, as measured by QALYs in this case, is the difference between the duration of life multiplied by my health-related quality of life here, my quality of life here, and without the intervention, and my duration, so my life expectancy multiplied by my quality of life. So you can see that the white space here is a net gain. This is a health gain that I make just by taking that drug, that intervention, right? Are there any questions at this point? Everything clear? Take that as a yes. If you have any questions at any point, just drop it in the chat. I'll try and read them. So this is the EQ5D. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It has 5 dimensions: mobility, self-care, usual activities, pain, and anxiety, and it has 5 levels for each of these, ranging from no problems or up until being unable to do something or having extreme symptoms. And this is a very, very simple questionnaire that allows us to estimate our quality of life at a particular point in time. Now there's some food for thought here, some controversial opinions about useful things and QALYs specifically. Now, before we move on to the next boring bit, I'd like you to think about something. So, because QALY is thought for allowing comparisons across different disease areas and different treatment areas, it's built so it's not built to be equitable. It just, when we base our economic evaluation on QALY, we just look at the most efficient choice, at the one that is going to create the biggest health benefit for the same money. However, there have been many arguments in the past about QALY not being equitable as it could be, as other measures could be, and some of the perceived drawbacks were that all of the emphasis is placed on the size. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. So, essentially, some of the arguments that have been made is that all emphasis is placed on the size of health improvements, as I said, on the size of the health benefits that I'm gaining with an intervention, ignoring the starting point and that the focus on quality of life is in years rather than quality of life in people. Now, to put that into context, I'm just going to make a quick example. Say that there's a new intervention for a condition that has been treated for years, right? That has interventions already available, that has drugs already available, and that those drugs are very effective to treat that intervention, to the point that the people living with that condition have a quality of life that is almost comparable to that of the general population. Now, say there's a new medicine that entails a decent improvement in their quality of life, taking them to a level comparable to the general population, and that provides a certain quality gain. Now, that's good, right? It takes someone with a chronic condition or an acute condition up to the quality of life level of the general population. We all want that, right? That's great. But now think about a rare disease, right, which has just been discovered, that has no available treatment at the moment, or that has no approved treatment, and people who have it have a terrible quality of life. Now, suppose that there's a little bit of a new intervention that comes along, right, and it does give them a little bit of an improvement in their quality of life, and it provides a quality gain, right? So an increase in qualities in that population, just a teensy tiny bit inferior to that of the other disease. Now, if we leave cost to one side and assume that the cost of the two interventions is equal, according to a cost effectiveness analysis or a cost utility analysis, we would need to pick the intervention that provides the largest quality gain, right? The largest quality gain possible, because that's the most efficient decision, right? If we think about it only in economic terms, therefore we would give the additional treatment option to the disease area that already has treatment, and we would leave those with no treatment that only would gain a little bit less qualities without a treatment, just because it's the most efficient decision from an economic standpoint. Now, obviously, this approach has been long debated, and many scholars have discussed it, theorizing the inequitable nature of qualities. And you can see some examples here. It's been mentioned many times by Forbes. There's been editorials by Winstein. It's been mentioned in Drummond, Brazier, and in other papers proposing a new approach to measuring health benefits. There's some resources for you to take a look if you're interested in this. Let me know if there's any interest, and I can share some resources with you as well. There has been someone, however, that has thought about this. So looking at the equity issue into decision making, and it's Richard Cookson, and he's published a paper with a number of other very cool people, and has basically made a copy of the cost effectiveness plane, just with just introducing health equity impact as well. So we have our four quadrants again, but we consider cost effectiveness as well as equity impact, right? So top right, more cost effectiveness and more health equity, and that's a win-win. And bottom left, cost ineffective, so it's not a treatment that we would pick anyway, and it also harms equity. So this is just a different way of introducing equity into the cost effectiveness reasoning that we make when we're evaluating new treatments or new interventions. Now that's enough of that. That's the last bit of that section. Now let's breeze through sources of data quickly. So there are many sources of data, but the two main ones we'll go through today. Now, the gold standard of data, the one that is considered as the most scientifically viable, is data from randomized controlled trials, right? Randomized controlled trials are what can be considered the gold standard of data. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, so there are many sources of data. There are several sources of data that can go into evaluations of new technologies, but generally randomized controlled trials are what can be considered the gold standard of data. Randomized RCTs, as we call them, are those where we try out the effectiveness of a medicine against a placebo, and they have high internal validity. Now, what's that? They are essentially, their value comes primarily from that concept, internal validity, and that stems directly from the randomization of the assignment of treatment. That is, the population of interest is split in two groups: receiving the treatment on the one side, our treatment group, and B, receiving the placebo, our controls. Now, the assignment of treatment is completely random. No one decides who to give it to, and the treatment is not assigned according to any criteria. It's just simply random. This gives high internal validity because it's not based on any patient characteristics or any observable outcome, because the purpose of trials is to estimate the effectiveness of a treatment in a target population at a given point in time. Most trials select a sample based on some criteria, and sometimes that justifies for feasibility purposes. However, groups are generally similar, which allows us to maintain the internal validity, which implies inherent scientific strength to the findings of trials. The results, however, sometimes cannot be generalized to the wider population, because the trials are carried out in a highly experimental setting. That is, it's the ideal setting with adequate doctor follow-up, following strict protocols. Everyone's controlled, everyone does what they're told, and this might not always correspond to how treatment in the real world is provided, and therefore results may not be applicable to the wider patient group or to the real world. And this is due to the presence of prognostic characteristics, so characteristics that the patient has that may influence the choice of one treatment rather than the other, that exist in the real world, and that may affect treatment assignment in the real world. If you think about the treatment that you are assigned, it's something that your doctor's decided, you have decided based on what you prefer and what your condition is, and that is not what happens in clinical trials. Now, we have real-world studies as well. So essentially, they allow us to observe the healthcare provision in the real world. So based on routine care provision and routine care decisions, they impose very little or no protocol restrictions, and essentially they provide important evidence on the cost effectiveness of interventions when clinical trials are not feasible. They can be secondary or retrospective. More detail on that in the slides, which will be provided. I just wanted to mention that there are generally two types of real-world data that can be used in evaluations. Cross-sectional data, which is a snapshot of one point in time. So essentially provides a snapshot of a slice of the population of interest at one point in time. And it's characterized by individual observations or patients across a number of variables or outcomes that are measured. These are easy to collect, they're cheap, they're easy to analyze, but they are prone to a little bit of a unobservable noise because we can't control for changes in time. But that's why we have panel data. So this is several snapshots at different points in time, which combines the cross-sectional observations with several points in time, which allows us to control for that noise. However, they are more difficult to collect because people get lost, people forget, people are lazy. They are much more expensive to collect, and they are very difficult to analyze. Now, here's a case study, and I'm done. This is the last section, I promise, which is chess. Now, many of you will know what chess is because many of you are involved with my colleagues in the running of chess. But I just wanted to give you an overview of what it is. Essentially, it's burden of illness, and it has two main objectives. Essentially, quantify the costs associated with hemophilia, the costs that we talked about before, so direct non-medical and indirect costs, but also explore the impact of hemophilia on patients' daily lives, on quality of life, on productivity, which also allows us to estimate indirect and societal costs. Here's a little bit of a breakdown of the study design. It has two sides essentially. There's a clinical bit which the physician fills in, which provides us with our direct costs and our clinical information. And there's one bit that the patient fills in with their quality of life, their direct non-medical costs, and their work productivity observations, as well as a few other variables which would be very interesting to explore. Now, these are some of the publications that have come out of chess. These have been used for advocacy purposes, and they are just publications that are available to the public, so you can use them if you want when you go and talk to a policymaker, a decision maker, anyone. You can just share them with your associates as well if you want. Here's some of the publications, just some examples. But I just wanted to mention that chess is a valuable resource to describe condition and treatment burden, characterize basic real-world clinical and treatment outcomes, and define the costs of hemophilia. It's being used in several settings, and cost-effectiveness models, in HTA evaluations. It's being used. Its data has been used for payer and reimbursement discussions in several places, with Germany, Australia, Canada, among others. Analysis of chess data has been, and its consequent publications have been used for advocacy efforts in several settings, most recently in the EU4 and the UK, with a notable example in Ireland. And the good news is there is something that is specific to Latin America. So this is one part of the study that we've already completed. It's the core countries. So we have Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and Chile, which provides data on a number of patients, a number of clinical records, to be able to quantify the burden of hemophilia in those specific countries. And as some of you will know, we are expanding chess to provide this in several other countries as well. But this is sort of besides the point. This just provides a a little bit of a breakdown of what we have and where we have it. But what I want to, and the reason why I mentioned chess is that chess is developing in collaboration with patient organizations, and ultimately it's created for the benefit of hemophilia patients and the hemophilia community. Patient organizations have access to chess. They have access to data for their advocacy efforts. What I want to say is use it. You have access to it, use it. That is the message I wanted to get across. Hopefully I haven't bored you too much. Here's some references to the materials I've used in drawing up this presentation. And do let me know if you have any questions, any comments, or any insults. Any feedback is very much appreciated. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your attention. That's it. That's me done.
Bueno, muchas gracias Enrico por la presentación. Yo me perdí un ratito ahí entre medio porque estaba con otros temas, pero bueno, capaz que podemos terminar la presentación ahí y volver a vernos a todos. Ahí está. Si algunos pueden activar sus cámaras, estaría bueno para verlos. Y bueno, que me comenten un poquito a ver qué les pareció el taller, que si tienen alguna duda, alguna consulta. Maggie, si podés hacer la traducción a Enrico, así nos sigue. Yo arranco con una sobre esto último que hablaste, Enrico, de los estudios chess. Los que se hicieron aquí en Latinoamérica hasta el momento, ¿se puede acceder a ellos ya o podemos verlos?
Todavía no. Go again, sorry.
Todavía no.
Aún no. Bien.
No,
perfecto.
no, porque nosotros
Yes,
como país, los 4 países participantes todavía no nos han dado permiso de publicarlos.
Yes. So I don't think there are publications at the minute out. So that they are published in peer-reviewed journals. But I am not personally involved in Chess Latam study group. That's some of my colleagues. I head up the Europe and US side. So do drop me an email. I'm not sure I've left my email address, but let me just write it down in the comments, and let me know what you would be interested in looking at, and then I can kind of direct you to my my colleagues who can respond to any specific questions about LATAM.
Bien, bárbaro. No, porque me parece que son buenos datos para tener eventualmente, así que bueno, es interesante que se empiecen a hacer estos estudios acá también en Latinoamérica. Bueno, ¿alguna pregunta
Andrés,
más? Sí.
Andrés, te comento.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think, you know, if there's any specific goal that you're trying to achieve when you go and talk to your policy makers, to your decision makers, and there's anything that that the use of data, the analysis of data, such as the one of Chess Latam could help, do reach out. We're happy to help. Obviously, you know, we're super busy and we have 1,000 things flying around, but we always try and make time for patient organizations. So do reach out.
Genial, muchas gracias.
Andrés,
Sí, Carelis.
perdón, ¿qué te parece si apagamos la interpretación simultánea y
Bien.
Enrico le van formulando las preguntas a Enrico y van respondiendo, y así los participantes no tienen que estarse cambiando de canal a cada momento? Hay que explicarle a
Bueno,
Enrico, ¿qué te parece?
sí, bien. Margaret, ¿le podés explicar? O Carelis.
Saco de la saco.
Okay, that's fine.
Place
Okay.
within the same channel.
Okay, so I'll try and talk in smaller sentences then.
Okay.
Dice, ok, voy a intentar entonces hablar en cortas palabras.
Bueno, ahí
They're talking about the study. Yeah, go ahead.
Sí, dale, Margaret.
Okay, the study was extended to November, mainly to improve some data coming from Colombia, because some data was missing about the expenses, the non-medical direct expenses from the patient.
Yeah, exactly. So we have extended the study. We have extended the study to be able to capture a little bit more data around the direct non-medical costs and the indirect costs in patients in Colombia and other countries as well. However, it's been extended because that requires extra ethics.
Okay, dice que extendieron el periodo porque les estaba haciendo falta un poco más de data de datos médicos no directos, costos directos no médicos, y que para obtener ese tipo de data hacen falta un esfuerzo adicional. Entonces, por eso extendieron el periodo a noviembre, que es lo que están comentando en el chat. Si tienen alguna otra pregunta, si quieren la pueden sacar en el chat y las vamos pasando a Enrico.
Bueno, o están muy tímidos o están muy cansados. O quedó todo muy claro.
Sí, o si alguno la quiere formular, igual toma la palabra y también lo hacemos un poco más dinámico.
No hay problema.
Or they're too shy, or they're too tired, or they got everything right.
I was just about to say, it either means that they're too tired, that I've been super clear, or that they've just fallen asleep.
Dice, o está todo muy claro, o están cansados, o se quedaron dormidos.
I would say it's the second. It's been very clear.
Too tired then. Oh, very clear.
No, muy claro. Vamos a pensar eso.
Very clear.
Bien.
Yeah, they wanted to think that it's very clear, everything. I bet it was.
Bueno, si no hay más preguntas, cerramos por acá. Quiero hacerle algunos comentarios antes de cerrar. Primero, que esto es un esfuerzo que hace la coalición junto con FEDUA y con el auspicio de Pfizer, que aquellos que no estuvieron en el primer taller, los que estén en los 3 talleres van a recibir su certificado por los 3 talleres, y los que estuvieron en este taller y en el tercero van a recibir el certificado por esos por los que estuvieron, ¿sí? Después, algunas cositas más. Ustedes todos recibieron ya su usuario y contraseña para acceder a la plataforma de la coalición. En la plataforma vamos a estar subiendo materiales sobre cada uno de los talleres. Esta charla va a estar la presentación de Enrico, van a estar las lecturas complementarias que acompañan a esta charla, y también va a estar también los materiales para las próximas talleres que vamos a tener el martes 20 y el martes 27. Con respecto a los próximos talleres 20 y 27, el horario de comienzo va a ser va a ser una hora más tarde que el de hoy. o sea que para Argentina, Uruguay, Chile va a ser a las 18, y lo va a estar llevando adelante el profesor Leonel Tesler, que pertenece a la Federación de Docentes de Buenos Aires, de la Universidad de Buenos Aires. Después, alguna cosita más que me quede por allí. En la plataforma también hay un foro en el que pueden participar y les pido que participen porque es la forma de llevar un poco más dinámica la cosa y hacer un poco también nosotros ver que ustedes están adquiriendo los conocimientos. Y bueno, en principio es eso. No sé cómo se manejaron hoy con el tema de la traducción, pero si tuvieron algún problema,
Bueno,
sí, dale, Mari.
sí, justo les iba a comentar que en un par de oportunidades perdí la conexión y en algunos momentos no escuchaba mucho la voz. Algún par de veces le pedí a Enrico que repitiera cuando consideraba que era como información clave. Pero bueno, si en algún momento parte de la información se perdió, 100% disponible a unirme a la plataforma y hacer la traducción en forma de video con el video de la presentación, con lo que necesiten. Pero sí se perdió en algunos pocos segundos, pero se perdió la conexión un par de veces.
Bien. No, yo me refería sobre todo a veces si todos tenían el botoncito para cambiar de canales, ¿no? Porque a veces lo que nos pasó hoy con Antonio fue un poquito de eso. Entonces, si les pasa eso, seguramente tienen que hacer una actualización del sistema y con eso estarían prontos. El video de esto se está grabando, por lo cual va a quedar el video cargado en nuestro canal de YouTube, y también creo que además va a estar con la traducción escrita, así que también van a poder acceder a eso también. Carelis, no sé si tenías alguna cosa más para comentar.
Sí, bueno, los invito a que puedan navegar por la plataforma. El contenido, todo el material que está allí está en castellano y está en inglés. Para esta semana tenemos un foro de presentación que dio apertura Leonel Tesler, que es el docente que va a estar acompañando en los dos siguientes encuentros. Los invito a que ustedes puedan participar allí. Nosotros, para poder medir también y tener una data de los países que están participando y de los que a su vez están asistiendo tanto a los encuentros sincrónicos como los asincrónicos, que es el tema del campus. Para esta semana nosotros tenemos la presentación que acaba de utilizar Enrico, la tenemos en la plataforma en inglés y en español. Hay algunos gráficos que son imágenes JPG que simplemente quedaron en inglés, pero la mayoría, toda la data está en castellano. Para la semana que viene, para el encuentro con Leonel Tesler, hay un cuadernillo que ya está subido a la plataforma. Si ustedes se animan, pueden irlo revisando y van a tener un poco más del material que vamos a tratar para el siguiente encuentro. También está una bibliografía, hay 4 bibliografías recomendadas o material de apoyo que son en castellano y alguna otra que pudiera subir esta semana, que Enrico nos las va a pasar, van a estar en inglés. Pero en teoría nosotros vamos subiendo todo el material que se presenta en estos encuentros sincrónicos, los estamos subiendo a la plataforma. La presentación de la próxima semana, que sería el segundo encuentro, y del día 27, la vamos a estar subiendo el día que ocurra la clase. Entonces los invito a que en la medida de lo posible ustedes vayan navegando por el campus y puedan ver todo el material que está allí. Los que cursaron el primer módulo tienen acceso al material del primer módulo, que fue el taller que dictamos en marzo, y tienen acceso a este taller que es el que estamos dictando este mes. Y el próximo encuentro, que estamos pensando que sea a finales de año, si vuelven y lo vuelven a cursar, tienen material a todo ese material que está allí. Entonces, bueno, es más que todo invitarlos para que ustedes puedan utilizar la plataforma y puedan aprovechar todo el material que está allí. Ahí nosotros subimos los links de encuentros de Zoom, subimos las clases ya cursadas, como por ejemplo esta, que la vamos a subir al canal, pero también la vamos a subir al campus. Entonces, bueno, es una convocatoria para que ustedes puedan navegar por el campus del COA.
Bien, gracias, Jarelis. Y además, también es algo que nosotros tomamos en cuenta, eso, ¿no? Los ingresos que ustedes hagan a la plataforma, que nos van quedando también registrados en el sistema. Bueno, sin más, les agradezco mucho por haberse conectado hoy. Espero que les haya servido y les haya gustado este taller y nos encontramos el próximo martes 20. Enrico, thank you so much for your disposition to being here so late and for all the knowledge that you have transferred us. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you for listening.
Bien.
Gracias por escucharme.
Bueno.